we are living in an era where it actually is harder for us to build wealth than it was for our parents to build wealth. The cost of housing today is 6 times our annual income. When my parents were my age, it was 4 times. You look at the cost of college as another example, 42% of our annual income. For my parents, it was 17%. Everything is uniquely expensive, which makes things just very difficult for young people.
Ed Elson, the investor, breaking down markets, strategy, and the psychology behind big business.
Crypto at large has made a handful of people really rich and then a plurality of others poor. It's actually ruined a lot of people's lives. And, a perfect example would be Trump coin, which I think was probably the greatest grift in the history of the American presidency. We know about the people who made money on Trump coin. There were the insiders who made about $1 billion. We don't know and we don't hear about all of the retail investors who lost money on Trump coin. It came out to around $6 billion in losses for regular people. So that's my issue with crypto.
What do you think the biggest blind spot is for young males right now?
One of the things I'm most concerned about for young men especially is the loneliness problem. The thing that's even scarier to me, 1 in 5 Gen Zers today, they say they have 0 close friends whatsoever.
Wow.
0.
Is there a technological advancement that scares you right now?
It's hard to not say AI. There are so many potential downsides with AI right now.
Ed, if someone's just hit play on this episode, they've never invested a single dollar in their life, what would your advice be? Where would they or where should they begin?
Well, first off, you should begin by making sure you have money left over to invest. I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about enough, especially my generation, which is young people. I'm 26, so I'm Gen Z. And I think a lot of young people, we talk a lot about little treat culture, where a lot of young people just think, oh, I'm just going to spend a lot of money here and there, and I don't really need to invest in my future or have any savings, which is a real problem. So I guess I would sort of back up and say, first off, make sure you're saving. Make sure you're saving more than you spend. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, my view, you want to be investing in stocks, and you want to be investing in American stocks ideally. The American economy, the S&P, is kind of a miracle. It's returned an average of 10% over the last 30 years. There are questions as to how long this is going to last, but if we're looking through history and recent history, the first thing I would say is just keep on investing in the market, keep on investing in stocks. That would be my advice. So first, save more than you spend, and then take that money and don't invest in crypto. Don't invest in day trading, and don't invest in gambling or these prediction markets. Just invest in the stock market.
Okay, so don't invest in crypto. We are seeing, we've got mates. We see everybody having a go at investing in crypto. They do well sometimes. What are your thoughts on crypto?
My thoughts on crypto are most people lose money. There are people. The only exception that I'll make for crypto is Bitcoin, which has had some enduring value. I still don't fully believe in Bitcoin for various reasons, but crypto at large has made a handful of people really rich and then a plurality of others poor. It's actually ruined a lot of people's lives. And the problem with crypto is all we hear about are the stories of people describing how they made a killing trading this ridiculous meme coin. I made millions of dollars trading Fart Coin or Cum Rocket. These are real coins, by the way, that actually exist. You don't hear the stories of all the people who lose all the money. And, a perfect example would be Trump coin, which I think was probably the greatest grift in the history of the American presidency. But you don't hear about, we know about the people who made money on Trump coin. There were the insiders who made about $1 billion. We don't know and we don't hear about all of the retail investors who lost money on Trump coin. It came out to around $6 billion in losses for regular people. So that's my issue with crypto. There are other grifts out there, but crypto is the industry that is probably most rife with grift right now. And what upsets me is that we're just not getting the full story with crypto. We're not hearing about all the people who are losing money. And what I would like is for there to be more reporting, more people coming forward and saying, actually, all of the money I lost on crypto, it ruined my life for these reasons. And there are plenty of those stories out there.
So is that borderline illegal?
You know, it's not regulated in ways that it should be, which means that technically speaking, it isn't illegal because our regulatory bodies have decided that it's fine. But if we had a rational governmental and regulatory system, I think it would be illegal. I mean, the thing you have to remember about with this Trump presidency, just as an example, you know, Trump has spent a lot of time, a lot of money actually as well, on gutting the SEC and basically making it such that we don't have any proper rules on disclosures and insider trading. So we don't have real regulation in crypto that would make it illegal. So therefore, no, it's not illegal. A lot of the stuff that we're seeing is legal because they say, oh, no, it's not a stock. It's also not really a commodity. We don't really have regulations on what this is. So since it's so vague and wishy-washy, we don't know where we stand on it. It's fine. We'll let you do whatever you want. If these were stocks, it would be very simple. There's insider trading that is happening. I mean, as I just said, if you have a handful of insiders who are making $1 billion on Trump coin because they're timing when are we going to release the marketing campaign for this crypto coin, and then how are we going to sell all of our coins and dump it on the retail investors, that is collaborative insider trading that if we were talking about normal stocks here, we're talking about, you know, Apple stock. If Tim Cook were collaborating, okay, we're going to put out this big press release. I'm going to dump all of my shares. We're going to sell at the top. And then who cares what happens when the stock invariably is going to go down closer to zero. That would be enforceable illegal behavior. And Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, would go to jail if he did that. But the trouble with crypto is we've decided, oh no, this is something else. It's not really the same. And therefore, if we do the same things that otherwise would be illegal in the stock market, it's not enforceable, it's not a problem, and everything's okay. So, no, it's not technically illegal, but if we got our act together on a regulatory framework, it would be illegal.
But how do you regulate something like that when it's, I guess, it's a global thing, right? And anyone can create a coin or create a cryptocurrency. Like you just said, some really weird names that I've never heard of. Like, how can you even regulate something like that?
Well, you got to invest in a legal team, and you've got to have the SEC needs to get together and say, okay, which things are fair game and which things are not fair game. And the SEC also has to say, if you're insider trading, and it's very easy to recognize insider trading. I mean, I don't remember if you guys remember the Hawk Tour girl who went viral, and she did her Hawk Tour coin, which was a similar thing. It was an insider trade where she basically did this big giant marketing campaign for Hawk Tour coin, and then she sold all of her Hawk Tour coins right at the top, and then obviously a bunch of people lost money. By the way, if you were investing in Hawk Tour coin, then we've got other problems. But it's quite easy to recognize. You know insider trading when you see it. So what we would really need to do is the SEC would basically just need to decide that they care about this, and then form a pretty simple regulatory framework where you say, okay, insider trading, in the same way that it's illegal for stocks, is illegal for crypto. And it wouldn't be that hard. But the trouble is, it's become so politicized to the point where they've decided, actually, no, we don't want to do that. And this is, again, part of the problem. I mean, you've seen it with all of these presidential pardons. You saw it with Changpeng Zhao, who was convicted of fraud. And then Trump decided, no, he's on my team, because, by the way, he invested in me. He contributed money to my campaign, and therefore I'm going to give him a presidential pardon, and it's fine. Do I even know who he is? No, but it doesn't really matter. My aides have told me that he's on my team. So it wouldn't be that hard, but we just need to decide that it matters. Right now, our government doesn't think it matters.
Ed, what's the most misunderstood generational shift that's happening right now that the Gen Z understand, but the older generations don't necessarily quite get?
That's an interesting question. I think that Gen Z is acutely aware of what the digital world is doing to us in a way that I don't think old people necessarily understand. I think there's more awareness for how phones and screens are affecting us and affecting our brains, but I don't think it's fully comprehended by older people, but also by society at large. And I'll just give you like a stat that kind of puts it into perspective. On average, Gen Z spends, when you look at the calendar year and when you look at the amount, when you add up the amount of time that we're spending on our phones every day, it comes out to 109 days out of the calendar year that we're spending on our phones. And we spend 106 days asleep. So basically what that leaves you with is 150 days left over to live the rest of your life, to socialize with people, to understand investing, to invest in your career, to create relationships, to date people. All of the things that old people think, why aren't young people doing all of this stuff? Why aren't they living their lives the way humans are supposed to? The thing that I think is misunderstood is like, we don't actually have that much time to do it because we have this chronic screen addiction. I mean, what I often tell people is we're essentially operating with 40% less time than our parents did because that 40% is stuck on our phones looking at the screen. So I think that's part of the generational divide that isn't quite understood. I mean, we are the first generation in history to have lived our entire lives online. I mean, other generations got to sort of see the transformation into a digital world. We were thrown right into it when we were born, essentially. So I think that's something that I think older people probably don't understand. It's possible that Gen Z doesn't even understand it quite acutely about themselves. It's possible that Gen Z we look at our lives, we look at why doesn't my life look the way I'd like it to? Why can I not go out there and make friends? Why can I not find a girlfriend or a boyfriend? And I think a lot of young people kind of beat themselves up about it and say, this is my fault. And I think a lot of older people sort of blame the younger generation and say, well, you didn't spend all that money on lattes and avocado toast, then your life would look different. But I think the reality is we're living in a completely different paradigm where there's this elephant in the room that we all kind of see in the corner of our eyes, but we don't fully recognize and address. And that is the gigantic amount of time, energy, and attention that is being divested away from our real lives and invested into this stupid thing that we call a smartphone.
Okay, Ed, so if there's a Gen Zer watching this now and they are feeling exactly how you just described, I'm imagining that they don't have a lot of friends, maybe they're feeling lonely. What advice would you give them?
The first thing that I say to young people is I think you first have to admit your situation. And I know that sounds kind of simple, but the reality is like, you can't get yourself into a different frame of mind if you don't recognize the hole that you're in. So you need to recognize like you do have it harder because of the amount of time that you're spending. There's also a lot of the economic issues. Like, you know, we are living in an era where it actually is harder for us to build wealth than it was for our parents and our grandparents to build wealth. And this is showing up in a myriad of ways. Like you look at the cost of housing as an example. The cost of housing today is 6 times our annual income. When my parents were my age, it was 4 times. For my grandparents, it was 3 times. You look at the cost of college as another example, 42% of our annual income. For my parents, it was 17%. For my grandparents, it was 13%. You look at even like the cost of stocks, the price of equities, the stock market today. The S&P is trading at 27 times earnings right now. For my parents, it was around 11 times. So everything is uniquely expensive, which makes things just very difficult for young people. So that's the first thing. I think you need to admit your situation. I think you need to recognize the difficult situation that we're in. Then there's, okay, what do we do about this thing? There are a few things that you can do. One of the first things that I think is really important, just from a career perspective, is you need to identify your talent, and then you need to monetize your talent with a job. And I think a lot of people aren't fully tapped into that. Like, you know, my co-host Scott Galloway often talks about don't follow your passion, follow your talent. And I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. I think young people need to get very serious about what am I good at and what can I bring to the marketplace that I can be compensated for more than my peers? That's a very serious question that you need to take very seriously. And then you need to go out into the marketplace and monetize it. And then there's the things that I said at the beginning, which is you need to save more than you spend and then take all of that money and invest in the stock market. So those are the things that you can do on an individual level that you can better your life. There are issues with AI that we can get into that are going to be very difficult for young people moving forward. Those are the individual things. On a larger level, on like a societal level, government level, it's kind of simple. Young people need to vote more. I mean, we still have the lowest voter turnout of any generation by far. In this most recent election, America is around 40% turnout. That's a huge problem. If the world doesn't look the way that it should, and if your nation, I mean, I don't know how things work over in Australia, but what I can tell you in America at least is that old people are the ones who vote, and therefore our society primarily serves old people.
Well, we have a compulsory voting system here, Ed. So basically everyone has to vote. If you're over the age of 18, if you don't vote, you get a fine.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but
that's
it also,
a lot better. That's a lot better.
It's great, but it also has a downfall, Ed, in that most of the time, like the younger generation will just do they call it like a donkey vote. You'll just tick you don't even do a vote. They just throw it in. And that's because they have such little faith in the politicians that are in power, because there's no young people representing the new generation. There's no, you know what I mean? So I feel like that the younger generation needs to be able to have a voice, and right now there is no voice for them in Parliament, especially even in Australia, and I'm sure it's the same in America. How do we fix that?
It's really tough because, you know, the way I think about it in America is there is a general crisis of faith in America and also in capitalism at large in America right now, which is quite concerning because we've seen this story play out before, and we saw it play out in Soviet Russia where there were very similar problems happening where, you know, like Karl Marx starts talking about, hey, it's not about left versus right. It's about top versus bottom. It's about the upper classes and the way that they're treating the lower classes, which led to a belief in, okay, how about we figure out a new system? How about we figure out this thing called socialism, which then turned into communism, which ended up leading to the death and destruction of millions of people. It was really, really bad. So one of the things that I worry about in America is there's such a crisis of faith in the system that we're deciding, okay, we need just a completely new system entirely. We need to basically scrap all of the rules and have something totally different. And the way I often think about it is like, well, we haven't really tried working to make the system that we have better. Like in America, I mean, once we get to like 80, 90, 100% voter turnout among young people, I'm willing, once we get that point and things still don't look better for young people, I'm then willing to sort of begin to have the conversation of like, oh, maybe the entire system isn't working at all. That, I mean, I'm willing to entertain that. And I guess it is slightly concerning to me hearing your issues in Australia. But I mean, to be frank, I don't have a very strong command of the issues in Australia. I'd like to know more about them. But it does sort of concern me that young people are voting in Australia. The donkey vote that you talk about. I mean, this is the problem with young people in general, is they don't really get clued into what's actually happening. But that does concern me. I'd be interested to know if the crisis of faith in the system in Australia is more severe than it is in America. I can tell you in America, it's really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised. I was in America, in Los Angeles in 2016, and I remember turning up to go to one of the polling booths just to see what it was like, just to kind of go through that experience. And I remember thinking, geez, there's not many people here that were voting. It was quite easy just to walk in and walk around. There were just a few people milling around. Where in Australia, for when on voting day, you literally stand in a line for about 3 or 4 hours to go and vote, and you have your sausages and your barbecues and all that kind of thing going on. So I was really surprised at that difference in the American. Was that just a bad day for me, or is that pretty much standard?
No, that's standard, and it's borne out in the numbers and the data. Which, it's a real problem in America, and it's a real problem with young people. I mean, a lot of people say it's because young people have lost so much faith in the system entirely, such that they don't want to go out and vote.
Yep.
Because they're like, this isn't going to do anything for me. And I'm willing to hear out that argument, but I don't fully buy it. I think there's a reason why our entire system and our entire society and all of our economic policies are inherently designed to reward the already rich and the already old. That's the way our system is set up. And it's because those people are the ones who are voting their interest, and those are the people who are investing in making the country look the way it does. And so what I think will probably happen, I try to be optimistic about these things. I think over the next 3 or 4 years, you're going to see an explosion in participation among young people. Because I think what young people are starting to recognize is that these things actually really matter. I mean, we read all of the crazy stuff in the news and the headlines, and there's kind of this disconnect between how you vote and how politicians and government and policy actually affects your life. But at least in America, where the policy decisions have been so visceral, I mean, this big, beautiful bill is going to be so economically destructive to so many Americans and really to young people, that I think young people are going to have this wake-up moment where they realize, okay, I actually need to do something about this, and they're going to get really politically active. And I do think that, I mean, New York City, I live in New York. We just had this mayoral election. We voted this guy, Zoran Mamdani, who is a self-described democratic socialist. And we can have arguments as to what democratic socialist actually means. But the point is, it has the word socialist in it, which is important in and of itself. He's also a very young guy, very dynamic, ran this unbelievable online campaign. I do think that, and by the way, it triggered the largest voter turnout among young people in New York City than we've ever seen ever. It was the largest turnout by miles. I think that is the canary in the coal mine for what we are about to see in America. I think young people are kind of getting fed up with what is happening in Congress. I think they look at how old Congress is and how much it has screwed them over many, many years, that I do think young people are about to show up in a pretty big way, which I'm excited about.
We saw that story here in Australia at the end of last year, and we saw people like Bill Ackman and all these people coming out saying that they were going to leave. What was it going on there at the time, and why were they coming out? Or like, were they going to leave? Did they leave?
Yeah, this is the very funny question, because you've got this guy, Mamdani, who's crushing his opponents. I mean, it was unbelievable. This guy that no one's ever heard of before. I think he's 34 years old. He's going up against this like scion of the American political establishment, which is Governor Cuomo, former Governor Cuomo. And he just eviscerated him. I mean, it wasn't even close. And you had all of these billionaires in New York who are saying, this is really bad. And by the way, if Mamdani wins, we're all going to leave, which is going to be a really big problem for you, the rest of New Yorkers, because we bring in all of this tax revenue because we're so rich. By the way, they're barely even bringing in tax revenue because they're not really paying taxes. They don't really have incomes. They just have these giant net worths, which they don't even pay taxes on. So it's not as big of a deal as they were making it out to be. But they say, we're going to leave New York. It's going to happen. Then he's voted in. And it's so funny because immediately the morning after, Bill Ackman, who was talking a big game about we're all going to leave, he tweets at Mamdani and he says, congratulations, looking forward to figuring out how I can work with you. It's like, okay, so maybe this, you're not actually going to leave.
Yeah.
And, the stats were striking. People said, there were surveys saying that 9% of New Yorkers are going to leave. We'll see. Maybe 9% of New Yorkers do leave. I don't know. But I would be very interested. This only just happened. Let's check back in 6, 7, 8, 9 months. Let's see if 9% of New York actually disappears. My money is on no.
Yeah.
They're not gonna disappear.
What I was confused by was what power does a mayor have? Like what can they really do? Like, do they change roundabouts? Do they change some street lights, make a one-way street into a two-way street? Like, what can they really do that makes someone want to leave a city?
Yes, they don't do that much. They can't have that much say on certainly tax policy. I mean, he's talking about how they're going to raise taxes. I don't think it's going to work out the way he'd like. He doesn't have much say there. He needs to work with the governor on that. Things that he can do, he can change housing policy. So he was talking about, I'm going to freeze rents. That's something that he could do. He could actually do that. I don't think he will. I think that it was a way to campaign, because a rent freeze sounds a lot like free money, or if you're, campaigning for student government in high school, it sounds like everyone gets free ice cream. And then do you actually get the free ice cream? You probably don't. So I don't think that's actually going to happen. I think he's more establishment than he campaign. But yeah, it's an important point. It's like he actually, on a structural level, he can't do that much. He can implement some things in terms of housing. He can do some things in terms of transport. He says he wanted to do free buses. He can do that. But for the most part, he can't implement the sweeping structural change that everyone thought that he could. What does matter, though, to the credit of the Bill Ackmans, it's less about what he can do and what his election, how it will actually change New York, and more about what his election says. It's as I said before, like, what is the meaning of democratic socialist exactly? And a lot of people are debating that, but that's actually less important than the point, which is the word socialist is in it. So what it signifies is we don't like the billionaires anymore. We don't like the way the system is set up. America is a capitalist society, and we've elected someone who is a socialist, and that's something else. That's something different from capitalism. That's a willing intent to subvert the entire structure. And it's quite incredible that it's coming from New York, which is the capital of capitalism. That is the center of Wall Street. So I think what the billionaires correctly identified is this is a really big message that he's putting out there. And if we let the New Yorkers vote him in, which they did, then we're basically saying we don't believe in the system anymore. And if you're a billionaire where the system has really worked to your advantage, then you're going to be worried about that.
Yeah. Ed, let's chat about AI, because I know here in Australia a lot of big corps are making mass redundancies. Job losses are at an all-time high. I'm sure you guys are going through the same thing in the US. That's obviously going to affect a lot of people coming out of uni and college. How do you feel about OpenAI?
I have a lot of feelings about AI. I think one thing, you mentioned the layoffs. A lot of people said that the value that we're going to get from AI is going to be so enormous that you don't really need to worry about it, because, AI isn't going to replace you. It's going to create all of these new jobs and all of these different things that are going to allow us to pursue our interests, and it'll allow you to get paid for it. And they point to previous technologies and they say, look at what happened to the internet. Look at what happened when the computer came along. Like, it's, it created more jobs, which is true. And I think that is going to happen. There is a lot less attention being paid to the reality of the short term, which we are seeing play out in real time right now, which is actually in the short term, a lot of jobs are going to get destroyed. And even if 10, 20, 30 years from now, we're going to see more jobs, if you're an individual person, 10, 20, 30 years is a long time. And that means you're going to be out of a job for 10, 20, 30 years. And the thing that people don't talk about when the computer came along is that actually there were people who had jobs as professional typists. And we say now, haha, that's so ridiculous. Like, a typist, what a stupid job. That doesn't exist anymore. It's like, those people actually got really screwed back then. And it was really difficult for those people, especially if they were on the older end, to retool and get themselves back into the labor market. And for the most part, what happens when a technology comes along, it creates vast amounts of value over the long term. But over the short term, it can really decrease your earnings potential and your earnings power, especially if you are in a vulnerable position. So I think that's the first thing that I would say about the layoffs. It's like, you should be worried, especially if you are in an AI exposed job. That is something that you should be thinking about. And what you don't want to do is buy into this notion that, oh no, AI is a net positive over the long term, and then forget that it actually could affect you. It actually could come and take your job. So that's one side of it that I think is important and deserves more conversation. You mentioned, what do I think of OpenAI?
Yes.
Shall we get into that?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
OpenAI has created one of the most incredible products and technologies that we've seen in a really, really long time. ChatGPT has transformed not only the way many people's lives work, but it's transformed the entire sentiment about the economy and the world at large. Imaginations on what the world could look like are running wild right now because of AI. And that is why, since ChatGPT launched, you've seen this massive run-up in the stock market. Everyone's buying stocks. Everyone's very excited about stocks right now, especially tech stocks. And 80% of the gains that we've seen across the stock market have been because of AI. So this has been, I mean, people make the comparison to the internet. It's like, yeah, this is probably that moment. This is a huge moment. Now, OpenAI as a financial business is making some serious mistakes. And that is, they are making a ton of promises, and they are promising to spend crazy amounts of money that they're not going to be able to afford. It's just not possible. They're generating about $13 billion in revenue right now, or annualized revenue right now. They want to spend $1.4 trillion over the next several years. And the question then becomes, okay, how are you going to pay for those $1.4 trillion? And by the way, it's not just them saying, oh, we're thinking of spending it. They're going out and they're saying to companies like Oracle, NVIDIA, AMD, all of the biggest, most valuable companies in the world, they say, we're going to pay $300 billion to you over the next 3 years. We promise we're going to do it. And then the stock market hears about that and they go, oh my gosh, that's a big deal. That means Oracle's going to generate $300 billion in revenue over the next 3 years. That's really important. We better increase our price targets on Oracle and let's start buying Oracle stock. And that's what's leading to this massive run-up. So they say they're going to spend $1.4 trillion. They have about, when you look at the amount of investments that they're going to receive and the cash that they have on hand, it's around like $100 billion cash on hand, which means that they are short $1.3 trillion. And they're losing money right now. I said that they're generating $13 billion in revenue. They're spending more than double that right now. So where are they going to get the money from? Well, they say that they're going to go public. They're going to have an IPO. So maybe you could generate some money doing that. But nowhere near $1.3 trillion, not going to happen, not even close. So the only way that they can do that is they're going to have to go out and borrow a ton of money. They're going to have to raise a ton of debt. And what is so interesting about when these technologies come about, when we saw the invention of the railroad, when we saw the electric grid, when we saw the internet, what always happens is you see massive overinvestment into the new technology, massive borrowing, massive debt being accumulated because of all this investment that you've promised about in the future, leading to, when there is a downturn, companies get completely wiped out. That's exactly what we saw during the internet. I mean, the stat that I always point people to, internet's happening, it's amazing. By 2001, 90% of the fiber optic cable which was being used to support the internet, 90% was dark, meaning it was unused. People were not using it. And it wiped out a ton of companies. If there's a company that's going to follow that path, I think it is OpenAI. I think that's the company.
Wow.
We'll see if they hear this message and decide to sort of retrace their steps and decide, actually, we can't spend $1.4 trillion. We can't do it. And we need to sort of, reassess people's expectations for this company. But if we're just looking through history and the way these things pan out, if we're looking for a company that's going to be sort of, people keep talking about the AI bubble and how is the AI bubble going to pop, you're going to need a spectacular story and a spectacular failure. If I had to put money on it, it would be OpenAI that's going to implode. That doesn't mean that the whole market's going to come crashing down. It could do a real number on a lot of the AI related stocks. But that's my view on OpenAI right now. Incredible product, but just awful financial mismanagement, which I think could lead to an implosion.
Ed, 47% of our audience are young males. What do you think the biggest blind spot is for young males right now, and what should they be focusing on?
I think for young men, it's really important to try to get out into the real world. I mentioned some of those statistics about how much time we're spending on our phones and how much time we're spending on screens. And it's having an effect on young people, which is extremely damaging psychologically. One of the things I'm most concerned about for young people and for young men especially is the loneliness problem. It's getting a lot more attention now, but I will just sort of go over it again for people who don't realize kind of how bad it is. Basically, in the past decade, the amount of time that we are spending with our friends has fallen at about 70%. So you think about why that's happening. It's because we're spending all that time on our phones. The thing that's even scarier to me, which I think is sort of the money stat, is that 1 in 5 Gen Zers today, 1 in 5 people in my age cohort, they say they have 0 close friends whatsoever.
Wow.
0. And this is a problem everywhere, by the way. Like when you look at it overall in America, the number is 12%. So that's a big number too, more than 1 in 10. But it's an acute problem for young people specifically. There are way too many people who just have no friends whatsoever. And I do think that the way out of that is to invest way more time in the real world. I think, it's quite a simple problem. It's a function of our time. If we're spending 40% of our waking hours on our phones, then that's just all time that you could be investing doing anything else. And so I think if I had to give one piece of advice to young men, it would be figure out a way to get off of your phone and figure out a way to put yourself in the real world, interact with people physically, go out, meet people, establish relationships, establish connections. I think that's the only way out.
Ed, you are in that demographic of people, and you're online consistently. You're reading a lot. You're probably on social media a lot. How do you manage it for your own mental health to stay, I guess, disconnect so you can connect with someone?
I'm in a unique position because my job requires me to be online a lot. And so I'm online and on my phone and on my computer way more than I would like to be as a normal, just functioning, healthy adult. But it's my job. I need to understand what is happening in the markets. I need to understand what is happening at a societal level, because my job is to come on a podcast and make sense of all of it. And so I don't really have a choice but to live a lot of my life online. But I think one thing that I do try to practice and recognize is I try to limit the amount, I try to frame that as that is my job. And my job is separate from my life. I have lots of other interests and relationships and things that I want to do that are separate from my job. And I think it's really important. I think we become very distracted when we start trying to think that we need to sort of like assume that who we are at work is the same as who we are in our real lives and in our daily personal lives. And I think it's important to have a divide. And so that's what I try to think about. It's like, okay, I'm going to spend this amount of time online and it's going to be intentional because I know that I need to do this in order to come into work tomorrow and do a really good job. Then I'm going to set the time where I'm going to put the phone away. I'm going to sit down for dinner with my girlfriend and we're going to talk about our day. And that's the non-phone time. And I've bucketed it out. I've decided intentionally and actively that this is the amount of time that I'm not going to be spending online. I think creating that separation, both between your physical life and your digital life, also your personal life and your work life, which it happens to kind of go hand in hand for me. I think it's really important to establish that separation, because if you don't and you let it all kind of blend into each other, I think life can become very confusing and very overwhelming. And I think that, especially for young people who live so much of their lives online, you start to think it's real. You start to think that that is what life is. And then you step outside and you realize, oh no, it isn't. People are so different in the real world than they are in the digital world. People are very down to say mean and nasty things online because it's way easier to do that. Because in the digital world, you don't have the cost and the bad feeling of someone reacting and being hurt by what you say. You just put it out there, boom, it's done. There's no cost to you. Oftentimes it's anonymous as well. It's very different in the physical world. It's completely different. People have to be nicer to each other because it would be too uncomfortable to be rude and watch people's faces scrunch up when you say something nasty about them. So I think that is an important distinction that people should try to make as much as possible. Digital life is not real life. They're two different things. And if you can figure out some level of separation, some boundaries between those two things, I think it makes life a lot more manageable.
Ed, you're a content creator. Your content is coming out every single week. You're creating content with Scott Galloway. Have you spent much time studying the creator economy, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think about the creator economy a lot. What is interesting to me about being a podcaster and being a content creator and the explosion that we've seen is I think that it relates and is connected to the loneliness epidemic more than people realize.
Yeah.
I talked about some of those very concerning statistics about loneliness, the most important one being that 1 in 5 people in Gen Z have 0 close friends. And then when you just look at all adults, it's 12%. So the loneliness... People don't really comprehend this, but basically most people that you interact with in your life are secretly craving friendship and connection because they're spending all of this time on their phones and looking at their screens to the point that they're not actually getting enough interaction with people in their daily lives. And this is, by the way, been studied on like a neurological level. There's this great MIT study which basically finds that loneliness has the same neurochemical impact on the brain as hunger. When you go long periods of time without seeing other people in the real world, it has the same neurochemical impact as going long periods of time without food. You start to kind of lose your mind a little bit. And it creates real problems. So I think that basically everyone today, because of the phone, everyone is kind of operating at that level where they're secretly craving a friend. And I think that it's playing out in many different scenarios. I think it's playing out in the political world. I think it's playing out in the business world, but it's also playing out in media. And I think that this is the reason for this explosion in the creator economy. When you think about the creator economy and these podcasters, you think about Joe Rogan, for example. What's so powerful about Joe Rogan is he's kind of like a friend to people. You know, if you watch CNN, that's a brand. And it's a company and an organization that you don't really feel much emotional connection with. But Joe Rogan, the reason he's getting more downloads than CNN and Fox News combined, the reason that he's doing it, I think, is because he's a person. And he's podcasting in his man cave or his basement, and it feels like you're there with him. And I think this really explains the rise of the creator economy, where I think a lot of people are because of their lack of connection in their personal lives, they're forming personal connections with people in the digital sphere and in the creator economy. And there is a word for this that people have talked about a lot, and it's been studied, and the word is parasocial. The parasocial relationship, this feeling where you know someone and it's not actually reciprocal.
Real.
You know them better than they know you. So if I had to describe 2025 in one word, my word would be parasocial.
Yeah, that is so interesting. As you were saying that, we're in the podcast space as well, and we're getting access to speak to people like you and having these conversations. And I think, I'm going to sound like an absolute arsehole here, but I think going through this year and having these conversations and also watching more content, I've found that some of the friends that I had from maybe 15, 20 years ago, I'm finding it harder to speak to them now, because some of the conversations that I want to have, if I've got a nugget of gold from you that I want to discuss with them, and they haven't seen that piece of content, or they don't really understand it, there's a disconnect between the conversation. And so therefore the friendship starts to drift apart because the interests seem to move apart. And I think that might be what is happening in this creator world, where people are watching the content that resonates with them in their private time, and then when they take that out into the real world, they're hitting the wall with the conversation that they're trying to have with their family or friends.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because what is so interesting about podcasting and content creation that people aren't fully comprehending is it's not necessarily just consumption of the media like it was 20, 30, 40 years ago, where you just sit in front of the TV and then the guy at the talking head talks at you and tells you what is happening in the world. It's more of a conversation. Yeah. Even if you're not even speaking. I mean, this right now is a long form conversation, and someone is listening to this right now, and you feel, as the listener, I feel this way when I'm listening to podcasts, that I'm in the room having the conversation with them. And that's what makes it so engaging. You can take that up to another level, which is, describes where I think the media ecosystem is headed. YouTube, as an example, not only is it that, there is a comments section. And you can engage in the comments section and talk and have conversations with all of the people who are watching the podcast too. So you get to engage in the content, and then it's way more interactive because we're all sitting around in the comments and we're talking about it. Then you take it up to another level, which is live streaming. And this, I believe, is the future of media, where it's not just, you post the video, you post the content, and then we're talking about it in the comment section. We're actually talking about it live with the creator. The creator is on there doing things, doing the show, and the audience is talking to the creator while they're doing the show, and the creator is responding in many cases. I mean, this phenomenon where people, I don't know if people who are listening to this watch live streams like, these YouTuber personalities, Twitch personalities like Kai Cenat and Aiden Ross, these very young, very online personalities, but they will actually interact with the audience in real time. And that's an interesting point that you bring up, and I think you're probably right, that if you're so plugged into the conversation with these digital creators that we develop these obsessions with, in some cases we kind of prop them up like they're these sort of religious figures. We're really obsessed with these people, especially young people. It probably does mean that, when you go have a conversation with someone and they're like, how's it going? How was your day? It's like, well, that's way back here. Yeah. I wanted to start with, what do you think about, NVIDIA stock right now, if you're a regular listener to Prof G Markets? Yeah. So it's an interesting point you bring up, and it is concerning. The conversation online is so vibrant to the point that normal conversation, the physical world, is probably pretty boring and inaccessible.
Ed, I've got to ask you, is there a technological advancement that scares you right now?
It would. I mean, it's hard to not say AI. I'm generally an AI optimist in terms of the value that it's going to create over the long term. But there are so many there are so many potential downsides with AI right now, to the point where it's hard to just not say AI. I've discussed the main reasons for me why I'm worried about it. I mean, the layoffs are a big deal. Amazon laying off 30,000 corporate employees, that's a big deal. But I think the thing that people kind of don't realize, people seem to think that AI is coming for white collar work, which is true, and it already is coming for white collar work. It's very, very difficult to get a job right now if you're graduating from college. It's very difficult to get a job right now if you're graduating from business school. You look at the employment rates from people coming out of like Stanford Business School, Harvard Business School. It is so hard to find a job right now. And people say, no, it's not AI. It's because these companies, they hired a lot before. No, give me a break. It's AI. The companies are literally telling us they're using AI to eliminate the jobs that are done or the work that is done by regular people, and then they're coming out with these mass layoffs. Of course, it's AI. It's all the companies that are most AI enabled. So the AI layoffs are a big part. The blue collar work as well. I'm worried about that when it comes to robotics. I mean, Amazon, again, has said in internal documents, and this was leaked by the New York Times, that they're going to try to get rid of hundreds of thousands of jobs through use of robots. And, that's maybe sort of slightly different from AI. It's more of an automation thing, but ultimately you're going to be using the AI, which you're going to plug into the robots, which are going to have the ability to think on their feet and do all of the fulfillment and inventory work that is otherwise being done by humans. And Amazon has every reason to invest in that, because if you announce layoffs, it's a good thing for your stock price. It means that you can cut costs. It means more earnings and more profits. And it's so funny because we're now seeing that is actually just a flat out bullish sign in the stock market. Whenever Meta comes out and says, we've been, seeing a lot of positive ROI on our AI usage, and we've decided that we actually don't need a third of our software engineer workforce. People go, this is terrible. Like, they're replacing workers. And the stock just goes up, just goes bang, because everyone realizes, oh, less costs, more profits. Good. So of course this is going to happen. And over the long term, yeah, we'll see new jobs. We'll figure out ways that people can kind of establish some value. Maybe we'll all be making money as content creators. Maybe we'll get to be paid for playing guitar and playing video games online. I mean, maybe. But all I do know is that over the short and medium term, many people are going to be affected. And I do think that if you're in a position which is sort of AI exposed, you do want to be worried about it in a healthy way and start thinking about ways that you can AI proof yourself, and also have a backup plan for if you do get laid off. Because what I can tell you is many people are going to get laid off because of AI.
Yeah. Ed, you and Scott Galloway, we love your podcast. You guys are taking it live in 2026, which we don't get to see in Australia, but it's very exciting for those in America.
Maybe we'll come to Australia. You never know.
Yeah, you should. We would love that. And I want to know, how do you think Scott's going to handle it at the end of the live show when you've got a bigger line for people lining up to get a photo with you and him?
I got to tell you, mate, it's not going to happen. That guy is so popular. It's really unbelievable. I mean, I love working with Scott. It's a ton of fun for me. And it's been really incredible the way he's launched my career. But I mean, look, when you're with Scott, and you're just walking down the street, it's literally every 10 seconds, people coming up to him, not just like, oh, you're Scott Galloway, but like, oh my God, you're Scott Galloway. I've been listening to you, bang, 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 and then you hear the whole story. And it's really incredible, and it's a testament to how much his story is resonating with people. He's like a different kind of celebrity. It's a celebrity that you'd only see in 2025. So I got to tell you, the line's going to be out the door for Scott. I know that for sure.
It's interesting when you talk about celebrity. I think the world that we're going through now, people you're a celebrity, Scott's a celebrity, the creator is a celebrity, and that live element that you're talking about before, where the connection to the creator is going to become much closer. You'll live stream and you'll talk directly to the creator. I think that's the world that we're in right now, where the idea of a celebrity, 10 years ago, a Jennifer Aniston or a Brad Pitt or someone like that, there was that disconnect between the audience and the celebrity, and I think that is what is happening right now, where you say like he's some kind of new celebrity. I think he just is what the 2025 celebrity is now. Yes.
He is such a good example of all of the things that I've described in terms of the parasocial relationship, because Jennifer Aniston, maybe more people knew who Jennifer Aniston is, and at peak Hollywood, everyone knows Brad Pitt. I mean, that's a level of fame which I think is actually very hard to be replicated. I think in the 90s, early 2000s, that was probably peak celebrity, because the media ecosystem was so centralized. So if you're a Brad Pitt or a Jennifer Aniston or a Michael Jackson, you are literally everywhere. But Jennifer Aniston in the early 2000s was not talking in your ears every day about work-life balance and the struggles of young men and what's happening in the stock market. That is a level of intimacy, detail, closeness that, as you say, could only happen today in a more decentralized media ecosystem where people pick who they like to hear from and they decide, Scott Galloway resonates with me for such and such reason, and now I would like to view what is happening in the world through his lens. That's how I'm going to participate in the news. And I'll tell you, that's how I did it. I was a huge Scott Galloway fan for a long time. And so this is why it was kind of a dream when I ended up working with him. It's like, this is someone who really resonated with me on an emotional and personal level. And that's really important. And I think that, that kind of relationship is new and we don't really know where it's going. And sometimes it kind of frightens me, the amount that people resonate with Scott, because it gives him a level of responsibility and accountability, which is actually really important. And, people like Joe Rogan and, even like Andrew Tate as another example, there are a lot of people out there who don't take that responsibility seriously enough. They don't recognize how much responsibility you really have when people look up to you and look to you as a guide and a role model as much as they do. And I think Scott is someone who does understand that responsibility. He understands how important his words are now that he is, so big. But there are a lot of people out there who don't, and that's another concern that I would have with the creator economy.
How did you and Scott meet?
So I reached out to my friend's mom who knew him, my roommate actually, and she connected us, and he kind of was like, oh, I'll take a phone call with this guy. And I basically just made this big pitch, like, please just hire me as an intern for a couple of months, and you can let me go at the end of the month, a few months, but let me just prove to you that I can make your life better and easier. So we had this phone call. He said, okay. So I was his intern for a few months, and I was helping him with his decks, and I was helping him with his book. And then eventually he says, you know what, you're graduating soon. This is when I was in college. I'll bring you on full time, which was like a huge deal for me because, as I told you, I was a huge fan of this person. So I worked with him full time straight out of college. I was his research analyst. I still am his research analyst. And then a couple of years ago, when I was working on his newsletter and his books and his decks, his speaking engagements, he said, let's start a podcast. I was like, oh my gosh, let's start this podcast. And yeah, it's gone from there. So it's been a very surreal experience for me working with the guy, but hopefully can be, proof that if you can find ways to reach out to these people. I was lucky, really lucky, that my friend's mum, my roommate's mum, knew who he was. But it's been an incredible ride for me.
This is a common thread that happens on our podcast. We spoke to Georgie Holt. She's now the CEO of Stephen Bartlett's company, Flight Story.
Yes.
Very similar story though. She basically just reached out to him. He ended up putting a calendar invite in her calendar to have a conversation, and then it began. That idea of just taking that leap to reach out to somebody. A lot of people don't do that. Do you have any advice for anybody listening right now who, how they should go about that? What's the best way to approach someone?
This is especially important in the age of AI, by the way. And that is, when you're thinking about, how do I AI proof myself? How do I make sure that AI doesn't take my job or AI doesn't beat me in the marketplace and in the labor market? You got to think about, what can AI not do? What I can tell you that AI can do is it can generate a resume. It can sort of come up with like a pitch on like who you are. And then it can also just send out applications on LinkedIn. It can just apply to like hundreds of thousands of jobs. And that is, by the way, what we are actually seeing on in LinkedIn right now is companies are overwhelmed with applications because AI can just auto apply. So that's a problem, because you might be a great candidate and you might be really great for the job. But if there are 1,000 other people who are applying, I'm sorry to tell you, the person who's making the decision isn't going to read the application, or at least they're not going to read it in as much depth as you would like them to. So you have to figure out another angle. One thing that AI cannot do, which you have to be doing, especially if you're a young person, AI cannot meet with someone for a coffee. AI cannot make a friend with someone and then reach out to a friend of a friend and say, hey, I know this person because I met them at this party, and this was my roommate at this event, and I've talked with your friend over here, I know this. AI can't do that because AI isn't a person. It doesn't know how to establish social relationships. So this is a huge thing for hiring, and people say, oh, it's unfair. You only got the job because you knew someone. Yeah, that's how most people are getting jobs. You have to know someone. You have to make the connection to someone. And if you don't know anyone, figure out a way in. Figure out a way to connect with someone. Reach out to them. Maybe you want to reach out to them on Twitter. Maybe you want to do it on LinkedIn. Reach out to someone who is in the company. Don't just auto apply and say, this is my resume. Actually reach out, form a connection, figure out something in common. Oh, I'm a big fan of Chelsea Football Club. You're a fan of Chelsea Football Club too. That's great. Let's connect over that. That leads to things happening. And ultimately, when you're the decision maker at the company, it is so much easier to hire the person that you either already know or whom someone else who you trust also knows and vouches for. That's a huge, huge upside. It's alpha, especially if you want to be hired for a job.
Yeah.
So people.
Yeah.
Ed, you've obviously you do the podcast with Scott Galloway, but you've also got your own podcast. You talk to a lot of founders. Do you think the next generation are all going to be entrepreneurial?
I think that there is a lot of interest in being entrepreneurial, probably more so than there was before. I think that it's probably a result of the kind of online hustle culture that I'm not a huge fan of, because I do think that there's a lot of glorification of entrepreneurship online in a way that isn't that productive. I am hopeful about Gen Z and their entrepreneurial prospects. I just hope that that it doesn't lead to everyone deciding the way that I'm going to get rich is I'm going to get into drop shipping and selling online courses like Andrew Tate and giving my opinion on crypto trading. Like that's a direction of entrepreneurship that I think is not going to be very productive. But yeah, I think it's good that Gen Z and young people are interested in starting their own businesses, having a level of agency, figuring out the technology, getting out there, starting their own businesses. I think that is a good thing. And I think we are probably more entrepreneurial. I think the question for us is like, can we direct that entrepreneurial energy in a way that is actually productive, that is actually making a real difference in society? If you're just selling meme coins, you're not helping society. You're not helping anyone doing that. It's not. It's not admirable. I don't think it's worthy of respect, and I honestly don't think it's going to really make you rich in the long term. So I think the question for Gen Z is like, how do we take that energy, that sexy entrepreneurial energy that everyone's very excited about, and how do we do it in a way that is actually net benefit to society? That's how you get rich, and that's how we make people's lives better. And I'd like for us to be more focused on that as a generation.
Ed, we like to wrap up our episodes with our guests sharing an object that is important to them. Is there an object that you have that you'd like to share with us today?
I do. I thought it was a very interesting. I like this. I have here a photo that my grandma sent me of my grandfather here.
Oh, so cool.
From 1954, when he was in college. I've chosen this because I really look up to this person. He died sadly last year, but when we think about what we want to be as a generation, this is exactly the kind of person that I think young people should want to be. I'll just tell you about who he was. So he went to medical school. He became a neurologist. He later served as a captain in the US Army, where he was practicing psychiatry and neurology. He later moved his family to Atlanta, where he was leading cutting-edge research on Parkinson's disease, helped so many people. He actually introduced the very first CAT scanner to the city of Atlanta, had this incredible career helping people, which again, I think we don't do enough of. We're so obsessed with getting rich. And after that, he retired and got into woodworking, and he became this master woodworker. And the thing that I think was just so amazing about him too is he would swim 1 mile every single day well into his 80s. He was a tremendous athlete, which I think is incredible too. So many things about him that I respect and that I think young people would really benefit from. His work ethic. He had this obsessive attention to detail. He was very interested in physical fitness, in making sure that he took care of himself, took care of his body, which I don't think we do enough of as a generation. And then probably above all, incredibly loyal as a husband, father, grandfather. He's sort of the true adult. He took care of his family. He took care of everyone that he met. Scott talks a lot about what it means to be a man. This guy, John Lee, he's sort of my hero, my role model for what it means to be a man. So this is my object, John Lee, 1954.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Ed. That's really great.
Absolutely.
Ed, if someone's made it this far into the episode, they've loved every single word that you've had to say today. Is there something that you want to say to that person that's watching this episode or listening to this episode today?
Go listen to my podcast. We've given some nice philosophical advice. I mean, I've told you what I think young people need to be doing on a personal level. Getting off of your phone, getting in the real world, establishing connections, establishing relationships with people, all of that good stuff. And now I will end with, if you're still listening, if you like what I'm talking about, go listen to my podcast, or my podcast with Scott Galloway, our podcast, Prof G Markets. That's how I would, that would be my final thing to say to anyone who made it this far.
Definitely. And if you're in America, go and see the live shows as well. And line up for Ed.
Line up for Ed, yeah. We would.
I need it.
Thank you so much, Ed.
Thank you, Sonia and Simon. This was great. Really appreciate it.